Hello. Welcome again. Before explaining how to get an appropriate inventory policy, it is convenient to review some concepts. The first concept is ABC inventories. ABC analysis is an inventory categorization method, which consists in dividing items into three categories, in which A is the category for the most valuable items, and C for the least valuable ones. Let me explain this concept with an example. The ABC classification is based on the Pareto principle, and aims to determine which products have a greater rotation. Suppose a company has taken data on the use of the following products. As you can see, the products were sorted from highest to lowest according to their volume of use. In the case of this company, the first two products represent 72% of the annual consumption. These two articles represent the A items. The following three articles represent 23% of annual consumption. Obviously, these articles are the B items. The last five products, at the bottom of the table, represent only 5% of annual consumption. These are the C items. Believe it or not, the frequency with which these parameters occur is really high. Regularly, the 20% of items with greater consumption value represent 70 or 80% of the annual consumption. And the last 50% of the articles represents only between 5 and 8% of the annual consumption. The A items should have tight inventory control, and a more careful forecast. On the other hand, in the case of C items, you should consider how demand behaves. If the demand of the item is frequent, but the monetary value of the item is low, then you can choose to have an overstock. If the demand is very low, then you should ask yourself if it is profitable to keep this item in the store. Now, I would like to talk about a second concept: the variability of demand. To measure the variability of demand, we use the coefficient of variation. The formula for obtaining the coefficient of variation is very simple: the standard deviation divided by the mean. Now, let me illustrate to you the usefulness of this concept. Suppose that the weekly demand of a company during the last year is as shown in the following data. As you can see, the coefficient of variation is 0.65. If the data are weekly, and the coefficient of variation is less than 1, this means that the demand during the year can be considered constant. Information on whether demand is constant is extremely important in designing the inventory policy of an item. Now, suppose the data is as shown in the following table. As you can see, the coefficient of variation is now greater than 1, but it is important to make an observation. Companies frequently haven't demand data. They have data on sales. The difference between demand data and sales data is important, because when we find a zero somewhere in the table, we cannot be sure if the demand for that week was really zero. Now, when we look carefully at the data, we can find that there are two zero sequences. The first is from week 4 to week 7. And the second is from week 31 to week 35. In addition, it can also be observed that periods 8 and 36 have a higher demand than the rest of the weeks. This should motivate us to think that, instead of the demand for the product was 0 units, perhaps we had a period of shortage in the inventory of this product. If we investigate and verify that our assumption is correct, then we can proceed to cancel that data. Once we cancel the data, then we can observe that the coefficient of variation has taken a value close to 0.69, and now, we can affirm that the demand for this product is constant during the year. On the other hand, it is convenient to should be noted that the coefficient of variation is affected by the frequency of the measurement. For example, if the frequency of the measure is weekly, then we can consider that the variability is low if the coefficient of variation is less than 1. But if the frequency of the data is daily, then we will consider that the variability is low if the coefficient of variation is less than 2.4. It is not a rule, but, if the variability of demand is low, then we think of items that move frequently with a very stable demand. If the variability is medium, then we think of articles that have some kind of seasonality. That is, items whose demand depends on the season. If the variability is high, then we think of articles that are demanded very infrequently.